I did a compilation of my favorite tropical fruit cakes.
Yeah.
There has been backlash. I don't know if you guys saw the comments.
Oh.
It's the vegetables. They're all like, we have just as many vitamins and all this kind of stuff. So we're gonna make it about vegetables today. I'm gonna start with a giant carrot. Well, I do love carrots, genuinely, and it was carrot cake inside, and carrot cake is one of my faves. I did level them, simple syrup them, and then I filled and stacked, or rather, I iced the tops of each cake. I didn't fill and stack like this. I filled and stacked and I laid them all up against each other. So that helped support the giant cakes.
How would you cut slices from this so you get the frosting as well?
You'd have to figure out where the first bit, or you could cut it on an angle and then you'd still see it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Or you could cut wedges and then cut them in half, but there was plenty of buttercream inside. Are you doubting my buttercream ratio? All right. At this point, if you need to chill the cake, you should chill it so that the buttercream firms up, and then I'm going to carve. So what's hard about this cake is it's giant, but it's easy to carve a carrot. I've seen some funny looking carrots in my life.
Is there a carrots.org?
Yeah, vegetables. I wonder if there's a vegetable council and that's why we got those comments. I carved my giant carrot, and in order to, how do I say this? It's gonna sound weird. In order to create the tip, I saved some of the humps. I always say save your humps, and I cut rounds with circle cutters out of the humps just to make the tip of the carrot. And when I carved, I made sure to round out the top, the fattest part of the carrot, and then I was happy with the shape. So I crumb coated the entire carrot and chilled, and then I iced the entire carrot. Then I sold some crumb coat and chill bundles. There's an ad, so I'm gonna have some tea. Next thing I did was cover the entire carrot cake in orange fondant. Keep in mind that the orange that you dye your fondant is just the base color. Of course, I'm gonna paint this to enhance it and make it look more realistic. Smooth it, tuck it underneath, cut away the excess, and now it's time to add details. You know how carrots have lines running all over the body of the carrot, but it's not solid lines. To paint inside the lines, I used cocoa. I didn't use Dutch process, which is what I use for my cakes because it's too dark and almost reddish. I used regular cocoa. I wanted to mimic the way a carrot looks when it's dirty. This carrot is not complete because, like I said, we just bought it at the supermarket, so there's still leaves on the carrot. I need to create these leaves. I used a thick gauge wire and I wrapped some light green fondant. I wrapped it around the wires. I did a lot of them and then I twisted them all together. I used a flower cutter that had a lot of spiky petals. I cut the petals in half and rolled it all up to look like the leaves that are on top of the carrot. These look great, but they are flat, so I painted them to give them some life by diluting green food coloring with clear food grade alcohol. And then what I did before adding this crown to the carrot, I surrounded the carrot with Oreo crumbs to look like dirt, and then I carefully placed the leaves inside. And the Oreo crumbs are actually gonna help the leaves and the stems stay in place. Otherwise, they'll naturally wanna fall out of the cake because carrot cake is so soft. If that wasn't enough vegetable for you, the next one is corn. I began making the corn by creating the inside of the cob. What is that called? It's more of a ivory cream color. It's not as yellow as the corn is on the outside.
Yeah, it's like this stick.
Yeah, well, I don't know what, can we Google this? Like, is it still a cob of corn if there's no corn on it? What is the middle of corn on the cob called? The ear is the spiked part of the corn plant that contains kernels. Each ear of corn is wrapped in a husk. Thank you so much. And then I had to do some simple carving, making the edges a little more narrow, but essentially this is gonna get covered with all of our kernels. The next thing I did was crumb coat the entire ear with yellow buttercream, and then of course I iced it in yellow buttercream. For the kernels, I decided to use candy corn, but I used not the regular hard type of candy corn, I used gummy candy corn. I was so happy I found these gummy candy corns. In fact, I think finding the candies are what inspired me to make this cake in the first place. Glue those to the surface of the cake all the way along the body of the ear. So now I have my kernels all over the corn. I have to recreate the top of the ear of corn. So for this, I had to create some gum paste that was like a very light, greeny, yellowy, grayish color. It's not the nicest color when you look at it. I used a round cutter to cut out that circle main piece, and then I rolled some more of my gum paste really thin and created sort of like the leaves that would have been ripped off, like because the husk comes down around the corn, but when you pull them away. So I recreated that. When I was a kid, we had these little stainless steel corn dishes and these little holders that you put in the corn, and then you could eat the corn. So to recreate this, I actually used the handles of my rolling pin. There's nothing like watching butter melt on your corn. So I had to make some butter. I made it out of buttercream, spread it into a bowl. I put it in the fridge to set so it would harden like butter. I had to actually heat the bowl a little, tipped it out, and then I cut squares of butter. And then what I did is I actually melted some of the buttercream separately so that I could put the square butter pats on the corn and have it look like it started melting from the heat of the corn. I really like this cake. The last cake I want to show you today, it's squash. So I haven't asked you guys yet, but which one of these vegetables is your favorite? Leave an emoji below. If it's carrot, if it's corn, if it's squash. Is there a squash emoji? For the inside of all of my squashes, I made sweet potato cake. I made a butternut squash, an acorn squash, and a kabocha squash, which we just learned is also called a Japanese pumpkin. Carved each cake. The acorn was pretty simple to carve. The butternut was interesting because as I was carving it, you know how it has that sort of figure 8 shape? It kind of looked like a giant peanut. And then for my kabaka, for my kabaka squash, I haven't...
You didn't get it.
I haven't learned anything in this. I can't tell how old this is. And then I crumb coated them all, iced them all. Now, the fun part of this is they're all different colors and they need to be decorated differently. Green food coloring just always looks like a crayon. You know, you need to nuance it with other colors. Butternut squash is almost like a peach colored on the outside. And then the acorn squash, it's mainly green, but there's a deep yellow area, like as it ripens. So I needed to cover it in the yellow and paint the rest green. I had to cover each one of my cakes, the butternut squash in the sort of peachy flesh color, the acorn squash in that deep egg yolk yellow, and then the and then the Japanese pumpkin I covered in a really dull moss green. Like after I covered that, it just looked like bleh. For the acorn squash, I mimicked the model I had. I used deep green food coloring diluted with alcohol, and then I sponged it on, leaving a nice yellow patch. The butternut squash is almost already the right color, but the color does need some refining. So I used ivory and some white food coloring, as well as some alcohol, all diluted together, and then I painted the whole squash. The Japanese pumpkin is harder because it's kind of like a watermelon. It has many colors and it has stripes. So I had to build up the color. I made a paint with white and some green, painted the entire squash. Then I made a dark green paint, painted over the white, and then I sort of used a brush to remove some of the dark green so that we'd see that white green underneath. And then there's also spots. And then to create the spots, I used some of my sculpting tools to sort of carve away the color. You can use a tissue or a paper towel, rub it on and pull it off, and that helps to remove a lot of the shine. And then I dusted the whole cake with off-white color dust. So there's 3 nubs, 3 different nubs to make, like I make any other nub. Added them to each squash, and then of course you want to paint them as well. There you have it. Proof that I also love vegetables. I apologize, I didn't put eyes on any of the vegetables. Leave a comment below, drop an emoji. Which veggie do you like best? Is it carrots? Is it corn? Is it squash? And also, if you want to see me cake more vegetables, leave your suggestions in the comments below. I already know what everyone's going to suggest, Orhan. And it's not because they like vegetables.